Here's our agenda. So first thing we're going to talk about, oh, we got someone all the way from Lagos, Nigeria. Thanks for popping out, Lionel. What is a constraint? We'll talk about what a constraint is. We'll talk about the novel, The Goal. And Dr. Eliyahu Goldratt, who authored the novel and is the author of the theory of constraints and many of the practices and theories within the theory of constraints. We'll talk a little bit about the 5 focusing steps, and that's a thinking process for remediating constraints that we discover. We'll talk a little bit about the drum buffer rope paradigm, and this is a way of injecting change into your organization to diffuse and eliminate constraints. And then we're going to go through a few real-life concrete examples of how the theory of constraints is used and how it can help us. And then we'll take a break from that and we'll jump right into question and answer time. So without any ado, let's just jump right on into it. So we're here to answer the question, what's a constraint? And this is a picture, it's kind of a diagram of a constraint. And a constraint we could define as anything in a system that limits a system from achieving its maximal performance or from achieving higher performance on whatever its goal happens to be. Almost everything we look at is some sort of system, and every system does have constraints. We sometimes substitute the term bottleneck for constraint because they do kind of mean the same thing. We like to think of a bottleneck as a particular sort of constraint, as we'll get into in a little bit. And the purpose of this diagram is to show you kind of the basic elemental thinking about what a constraint is, okay? And what we know is that no matter how much water we pour into either the blue tank or the red tank or the green tank, no matter how much we control the flow between the blue and the red and between the red and the green, it will not increase the system's performance. The system's performance is constrained or limited by the element of the system that has the lowest throughput. And that's what a constraint is. So when we talk about constraints, we talk about taking a step back from our work or our value stream, taking a look at it objectively, finding the places where the bottlenecks are. Where does the flow get hampered? And addressing those using the thinking processes that we'll talk about tonight. So this is a very high level abstract example of what a constraint is. We can also think of a constraint as a weak link in a value chain. So if this is our chain that represents our value, and we have to do quite a heavy lift, we can already see where the weak part of this system is. I have a piece of string holding a chain together. And the moral of the story here is that if I want to improve the overall strength of this chain, it doesn't matter what I do to the steel links, it will still be weak until I address the weakest link. And that's why in the theory of constraints, we reiterate over and over again how important it is to find the most important, the biggest constraint, and deal with the biggest constraint before dealing with other constraints. So this is a classic example of an emergency. We know where we need to do our dealing. The good news is that when we strengthen the weakest link, it always impacts the strength of the entire chain. And we always target strengthening the weakest link first without exception. And we could say the moral of the story again is that every system has some sort of constraint on it, or every system would have unlimited, perfect throughput and performance. So we know that every system has constraints. It's our job as lean thinkers or as TOC thinkers to think about our work in these terms.